Hello everyone. We're looking at chapter 21, Digital Imaging Exposure Techniques, and I'm going to keep the videos short on purpose because I realize that it's hard to listen to a video for a long period of time and absorb it all. So I'm going to just get directly to the points and move through this quickly. And I apologize for the quality of the video. It may not be as great at all times because I'm going to move in and out of the page as I point to specific things. But here is on page 281, procedural considerations. First of all, is just telling you that it's still just as important to set your technique, which is KV and mass, in digital imaging as it was in film screen imaging. And the first thing it talks about is centering anatomy. And we see here that talking about using especially automatic exposure control or AEC, it's very important to position the anatomy over the correct photo timing cell, as we learned about back in chapter 17 and 18. Chapter 18 actually was on AEC, and it's very important to center the anatomy over the correct cell or you'll have premature shutoff, and that will result in an inadequate exposure and quantum model to the image, which is obviously not as good as the regular diagnostic image. The histogram errors occur whenever the anatomy in the field are not recognized as having the appropriate density for the selected exam that you chose at the APR, and that results in the anatomical data being miscalibrated by the algorithms in the computer reader. So you must align the fields in the with the edges and the collimated borders is what it's talking about here. And if you do multiple fields on one plate, then to ensure that the histogram analysis or the reading of the data by the computer again is recognized, then you need to have the images aligned on the plate adequately. Like A shows symmetrically collimated borders, which is good. B is not good. C and D and E are not good because they're misaligned. They're not appropriately collimated with symmetrical borders. And it's recommended that you only do one image per plate anyway, with CR and DR, because of the risk of misalignment and miscalibration, and which will lead to histogram analysis errors by the computer. So asymmetrical fields are not good. This is what it's talking about here. And then on the next page, 283, it talks about overcollimation, which it says there that collimation continues to be a big deal with digital imaging because at least 30% of your imaging plate, it says, needs to be exposed to avoid histogram analysis errors. So you need to use as small a plate as possible and then open the collimation up to cover at least 30% of the plate in order to get an adequate image. Reducing patient exposure, it says the ALARA concept, as low as reasonably achievable, talks about the fact that you need to use as high KV as needed to adequately penetrate the part, and use as low a mass as you can get. Higher KV means that you can use have better penetration of the part, and you can use less mass, which is always good for the patient, because mass is really the dose to the patient. And it says here that the computerized images will allow you to reduce the dose for anywhere from 20 to 50% to the patient. All right, on the next page, it talks about using converting to digital imaging from film screen, and it says that most CR systems, or many of them, operate at a 200 speed class compared to film screen. It's what it's talking about when it says rare earth speed class was 400 for film. That means digital imaging does not convert the X-ray signal into digital data as quickly as it was converted on film screen into an image. 200 speed is only half the speed of 400. So therefore, with the digital systems, you're either going to have to use twice as much mass as you did with film screen, or the better technique would be to use 15% more KV. Following the 15% rule means that you can use higher KV. 15% increase in KV means that would double the exposure to the image receptor and thus allow you to use the same mass with the computer that you did with the film screen. So rather than doubling the mass. So you can keep the mass the same, but increase technique for KV by 15%. Look back at the 15% rule that we studied earlier last fall if you need more information about that. Okay, so increasing KV is a very good way to maintain the exposure to the IR and still not increase patient dose, because higher KVs mean better penetration through the patient and less absorbed dose to the patient. Comparative anatomy and manual technique rules. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this because this was covered in chapter 17. Overexposure to the IR can occur because CR and DR has an extremely wide latitude, whereas film screen had a narrow latitude, which means that you can miss the technique with CR and DR and still get a very good image because it provides this CR computer-based long linear image, which means your dose can be really high and you can still get good image quality, or your dose could be really low down in this region and still get good image quality. Whereas with the film screen has a steeper curve and you don't have much exposure latitude or margin for error with technique. I apologize for the image being a little moving, but it's hard for me to hold the camera steady while I turn pages and stuff. All right, on page, let's see, 285, it also talks about the fact that you can have saturation of the image will occur with 8 to 10 times the normal exposure level, but that's a lot. I mean, think about how many times greater than normal that would be before you get the digital image to even be saturated. Saturated means way grossly overexposed. All right, here on this page, 286 rather, is showing you two images. One, the APHS was taken with 120 kV and 6 mass on the left, which is about twice the needed amount or normal amount, and B was taken with 400% more than normal. And it is the one that is overexposed. Actually, that image is 8 times overexposed, not 4 times. So it's 800% higher than normal on the right, B. They made a mistake in the book there, because if the normal amount was 3 mass, then A was made with twice as much, or 6 mass. See, it says 200% for A. Then B would have been 800% more than normal, which would have been 8 times. So B is saturated, and the lung fields are too dark for diagnostic quality. Okay, then over on figure 21.6, they're showing you techniques that are underexposed. I believe it says the knee phantom in figure A was taken at 80 kV and 8 mass, B was taken with 1/4 of that mass, and C was taken with 4 times the mass. And you see B is supposed to show an underexposed image with quantum model, and C is supposed to show an image that's still of sufficient quality because the computer was able to correct for 4 times the normal mass and still look good. So B is underexposed with quantum model. The computer can't make something out of nothing. And then C is normal with just 4 times the mass. So that can tend to cause technologists to want to use dose creep, which is increasing the mass way above what's really needed for the exam. See, as you were up here in C, they used 4 times more mass than was actually needed and still got a good image. And technologists will tend to do that because they want to ensure they don't underexpose the image, and that can lead to dose creep and not following the ALARA concept. All right, figure 21.7 is all self-explanatory as well. It shows that as you go along from left to right, the images are getting lighter and quantum model is appearing because of insufficient technique. Too low a KV was used or too low a mass was used, and what they should have done as they went along was increase the KV to provide sufficient penetration. All right, automatic exposure control, of course, can still be used, which means you're using a grid because you're doing it through the table system, rather than tabletop. And when you use the grid and the automatic exposure control, it's important that you do use sufficient KV to penetrate the part adequately, or you won't get a sufficient image, and also to position over the correct photo cell, detector cell, which is talking about in that paragraph, in order to avoid premature cutoff of the exposure, as it says there. And then exposure to the IR and the IP, I'm going to skip that. Effects of KV on the image is you can increase KV and still have a good